Hi, Mike.
Hey, how's it going? Oh,
I'm good. We clapping. It's going good. So I think we've solved our audio issues. We just had a few minutes of that, but now um, it seems that things are looking good.
yeah, great.
Yeah,
I can hear you
yeah.
nice and clearly.
I hear you,
We're both
and
in different settings right now. We're both by our pianos.
yeah. Well, you can't see my piano. Maybe I tilt. Well, it doesn't matter because we're not really releasing the video. But this is a piano device here. You can
Whoa.
see the keys.
This
And
could
yes, you
really-
have a very nice shiny. Is that the NX1 thing? Is that what that
Yeah,
is?
the Avant Grand. I think that's what
Ooh,
it's called. So it's a
cool.
digital. Yeah,
Yeah.
in 1X. But it's perfect for a condo because then my neighbors don't have to hear me practice all day.
Like I had a Rhodes when I lived in Boston,
Uh-huh. That sounds
and
awesome.
Rhodes is a super cool instrument,
Yeah.
and I unfortunately had to let it go when I moved, which is really sad. But my friend Brian has it now, and what was the worst was I had this experience. I was practicing on the Rhodes, and you know the Rhodes. Have you ever played a Rhodes?
I don't think I have actually.
It's a it it's a physical instrument with actual little tines on it, like little strings, like that make almost no noise. It's like an electric guitar. Like you can't really hear it. You have to amplify it to hear it. And so I was playing it like with no amp because that's like loud enough for me to kind of hear in my apartment. And someone like poof 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 with the broomstick against the floor. A person who I've never met. I was living in this house for like 3 months. And I said, "Oh no, what did I do?" And then it was apparently it's like the clickety clack of the keys,
Oh, yeah.
It's driving him crazy. And then it was one of my first experiences of like, it's really distracting. Even though I knew I wasn't making noise the way, but just knowing that you're just like that the noise is affecting somebody else negatively.
I wonder if that's
um,
worse or better than having music, you know? I mean, it's obviously softer than music would be if you had it amplified, but I don't know. It's just more, it's like noisier and like a little more annoying probably just to hear clicking all the time.
yeah, it's also kind of like people. I guess there's like a funny video on YouTube of like these guys like being horrible upper neighbors, just like trying to like confuse their lower neighbors by like making like rolling, like they're like making like they have like they're making rolling balls. They're moving bowling balls around and like doing all those ridiculous
I think
things.
I've seen this, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess, but of course, if it depends what you call music practice. Like if practice means like playing something through, I guess that's kind of nice. But typically for people like us, I mean, well, for me, my practice is like, which I guess is not like nice to listen to.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm just like repeating passages and playing things
Yeah,
slow. It's not like anything to enjoy leisurely. I
yeah.
don't know.
Or like really working out like this like I was working on a Mozart sonata here at the studio one time, and I was just trying to get that balance of like of this like left hand pattern thing, and but I was just like I was just forever working on like like 6 notes or something. It's just like, I don't even know what it was. I was like I don't know. It was like that's five, but like something like that. And then like eventually like the neighbor came around the thing and like closed the door. And I was like, oh yes, like because it was like it's just not doing anything. And I was like, because sometimes you're playing big music and no one really cares because it sounds like something. But when it's just like this, that didn't really.
I remember reading this. I don't know. It must be in. I don't know if it's like Richter's autobiography or something like that. It talks about meeting Rachmaninoff, and he goes to his house and hears him practicing the Chopin 25/6, the third etude. But
Uh
but for like a third, like every 4 seconds or something like
huh. I,
that.
I've heard of the ridiculous slow Rachmaninoff practicing, but I didn't know I didn't hear it through the lens of I don't think Richter. I
I don't know
have
where I
that
heard this story. I can't remember.
that I want to know where that's from because I've heard that like there's like this thing I often say to my adult students who I'm trying to like tell them to slow down. They're like, but I want to play that slow. I say, well, Rachmaninoff practiced like super slow, and he was a really good piano player. So take a lesson from him.
You ever heard Andre Laplante practice? It's like that
No.
too. Everything is quarter speed, basically.
Yeah, who else was like that? An NEC guy, Stephen Drury. I think he
Oh,
also
okay.
practiced things very, very slow. He was like a Ives specialist, if
Yeah.
I right. I don't
Yeah.
really know him at all, but I remember he would also. And then like his recording is like, this Ives stuff is just stupid, and then he's just like slaying it, and he's like, the secret is don't play fast. It's like,
That's pretty good.
it was really great things to hear all these great people playing so slowly. It gave you kind of confidence that's like, oh, it's okay to trust in this process a bit like
Yeah.
longly. Um, I love that Richter book. Is the Richter book that you're thinking about? Like it's kind of a collection of like kind of like oh, there's a guy who's
Bruno.
like editing his like journals or something. It's not
Yeah.
actually is that what it is? I guess that kind of abridged thing
I
or
think
whatever.
he just kind of, oh, I don't know if he had, I can't really remember this book that well, but I don't know if he had kind of stayed with Richter or like kind of like wanted
Yeah,
the
that's the
process
same
of
one.
it.
Yeah, that's an
Um,
amazing book.
but then you get some of the diary entries, Richter's diary,
Yes.
and he's
Yeah.
so hypercritical.
Yeah.
Just really.
I have it right there. I can see it.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
It's too
Enig
dark for me to
Enigma
make
or
it out.
something.
But I think that guy also did like a Glenn Gould documentary or
Right.
something. If
I
I
think you're right. Yeah.
yeah.
But it's
So
it's so funny to see, one of like the greatest pianists in the 20th century just to be like, oh, I shouldn't, like, I'm embarrassed to call myself a pianist or say things like that that are just very
yeah.
harsh. But
I remember like a similar story too with like Oscar Levant, who was like a colleague of Gershwin,
mhm.
and like was like crazy awesome piano player, but also like super like not confident. And always saying like demeaning things like
To themselves.
and they would like, go to his friend and ask him for a piano lesson. His friend's like, what are you talking about? Like you're like way better than yeah.
Actually, this is a
Um,
funny, sorry, this is just a one side note, but I remember reading this quote about an interviewer asking Richter why he didn't teach, and his answer was, "What if I'm wrong?"
that I mean, isn't that crazy? Like, I didn't teach music for a long time because I felt like I didn't know enough.
Yeah.
And then I was always kind of I saw people who were not piano players teaching piano lessons, like a singer or whatever, and they were doing it. And, it serves a purpose and a need, I guess. But I just felt really responsible. Like if I have a piano student, again, you're shaping the way that they're going to appreciate and feel about music and stuff. So you want to kind of give them a good direction.
Yeah, for sure.
But I guess maybe the alternative is that they wouldn't start otherwise. So um,
Yeah, exactly.
so it's not to say that people who don't play the piano or music, but I mean like there was like 13-year-old kids who could kind of play a couple songs. Like I don't mean like a music teacher at a local community who is not necessarily a piano player teaching the piano. Um, I just mean like kids who are like I remember there was like 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old people teaching music. And again, maybe it was um, because there it was other in that location there was that or nothing. I don't know enough to kind of criticize it, but I always stayed away from teaching just because I didn't want to negatively
Just,
influence someone's
I mean, there's a lot to think about. I think even, especially for beginners,
Mhm.
you're their first
Yeah, and some
introduction
people say,
to instrument.
I mean, the beginning lessons are like the most important part, and then some people are like, oh, it's only the beginning. See if they like it, and then get a more serious thing. Is it?
Really two
It's
minds about it.
yeah, like, and there's like, not. I'm still trying to navigate that. Like, I had a friend ask me about like buying a keyboard or piano for his kid the other day, and I was like, well, like, I mean, really, anything under $500 is kind of the same. My point wasn't like you need to spend more than $500. I was more like, up to a certain point, like it's not. But he wanted to pay like $60 for like a little like 12 key. I said, well, that's not. If you got like a 49 key keyboard, I mean,
Yeah.
it's okay. I mean, you don't have to buy a full scale piano, but he's like, yeah, because I want to see if they're gonna like it before they get into it. But for them to do that, you need to give them at least like a set of keys. But of course, piano sucks because it's like they're so expensive,
So
and
expensive
so it's
and
it's
large,
and
frankly.
big,
Yeah.
yeah. I really have a problem like in our house. Like, there's no place for the piano to be that's not like next to the table. Like, so there's no extra room in our. I mean, we have this whole space, so like this is cool. Like, we had to rent out an entire other building to have a piano space.
We had to choose
Um,
between having a piano or a dining table, so
so you just eat off the keys.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
But because it should be a separated place. You should be in a different room away from the distraction of the house. And they got a lot of
Yeah.
students, and like they're practicing the piano, and their parents are like watching TV, and you're trying to like, it's like, I know your kid isn't like super serious about it, but you're not really giving much of a chance to do anything because I mean it does take a lot of concentration, and a lot of people struggle with that. I mean, I'm struggling with it here with in some situations because people don't take it seriously enough, but then they have their kids. That's a whole that's a big sidetrack that we could probably go down. Um, but yeah. Oh, I wanted to check one thing.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, it's all fine. Yeah. So, but I mean, these are the kind of I would love to. The way that I'm viewing the podcast up until now, if we can call this a podcast, I mean, it's a podcast,
Yeah, it's a
right?
podcast.
It's a podcast. It'll soon hopefully be on Apple Podcasts. I don't know why it's not there yet. It should be. It's been like 2 or 3 weeks, but it takes a while for it. But we're already on Spotify and stuff like this. And I kind of view like these first weeks as like trying out different things and stuff, and
Yeah,
then
sure.
at a certain point, like properly promoting it, and the back catalog will stay there, so people can kind of trace the process if they feel like it. Because I think we've had a bunch of interesting, decent conversations,
Yeah,
Michael.
very cool stuff.
Yeah, and that would be, I think, a really good topic to explore and go down. Like, because I think a lot of people are just. I mean, what is it? It's so it's easy if you're gonna go study the piano, like for like studying the piano, then people know what to do. But for those who are just learning the piano, just to kind of add it to their hobbies list, um, are there parameters that one can set that are? I mean, I guess there are no general parameters, but it would be it's a there could be a discussion about it. I don't know. Yeah,
So we're both at pianos today because
we are.
remind me what we're trying to do
Well,
today.
originally, when we met last, I said because we've been talking about improvisation and stuff, and I thought, well, it'd be kind of fun to kind of dip into something that I'm really not so great at, and something that you're. Well, I mean, just it's not so much my comfort zone, and like I had recorded myself for about 40 minutes learning this Pathetique Sonata
Right.
from Beethoven.
Right.
And I thought it would be kind of fun to kind of go over that video, just kind of watch like this learning process unfold. But then during the week, I thought, I'm not going to really go through that video before we meet. And like it'd be kind of a big 40-minute. I thought it might be possible to like waste a lot of time going through the actual
Right.
video,
Yeah.
which we could also try sometime. But then I thought, well, why don't we just try to do something live? Test it out. This being the testing phase of our podcast, we can just like poke a little bit here. And I mean, I think we both have ever played the piece before, really.
Yep. Just taught it a
And
few times and that's about it.
yeah, and if things that we discovered or are still working on, I mean, you were away a bunch. I don't sit down to the piano to like practice on a regular basis either. So like the time is limited. But how do we, what did we come across in our limited time? I think that was kind of the direction of what we wanted to talk about. I think. Is
Yeah.
that
I
right?
mean, I thought I figured I'd just come to this fresh right now, having not looked at it. I haven't even practiced today,
Uh
so
huh.
I figured I'd just kind of come at it fresh because it would be a more authentic experience.
Also, you didn't touch it at all.
No, I didn't look at it.
Oh, cool. I looked at it a bit. I kind of like went over the first, of the measure 11 and on, which is the allegro
Uh-huh.
part. And well, um, just the rotating octave thing, figuring that out, and then my issues that I came across with stuff, and yeah, I don't know. How do you want
You
to
want to
start it?
start with maybe some things that you felt were tricky, or things that you were kind of um,
Sure.
it's about, and maybe I can like talk about how I might tackle something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So I think here, I mean, I don't play a lot of music which is motoric at all. Like I usually kind of leave a lot of spaces and am not playing like these kind of things for extended periods of time.
Right.
And so that was why I wanted to do it was to kind of see, well, how hard is it to kind of bring that like this kind of like making that work, and you find that you rush or whatever, and again, I'm really out of practice with playing classical music in that way, and it was kind of fun. So I was trying to experiment with different ways of, I mean, when you have like a long extended period where you're playing just like a tremolo or like
Yeah.
these octave um, patterns, like where I guess you start. I wanted to kind of work on the twitch stuff, the faster motion a bit more, and then I was finding I was trying to kind of have the I didn't want to. I was trying to control rushing, but also what I found I was doing was seeing things in, trying to see the half note pulse, one, two, one, two, and then filling that in properly without rushing.
Right.
And, but, and then when I was putting it together with the other hand, what would often happen is that the right hand would, um, it was weird because I found that it was pushing me out of the groove.
Mm.
And then I also felt kind of, I was trying to find like that, the feeling that the original like source of this piece, which is like, this is a really exciting texture. It's a really exciting thing. It's a kind of a new, well, I don't know if it's new, but it's definitely got this very um, revolutionary feel to it. Like it has this energy, this really kind of excitement, and trying to do that while also um, uh, like keeping it all together. It's,
Mm.
it's it's difficult to talk about here in real time. This is kind of a fun experiment to do with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So we can see how this all works. And I also haven't played today, but I mean, so talking just about the left hand by itself. So then you'd have like one, one, two, one, two, one, two, one, two, one, like that,
Yeah.
and then I wanted to really feel each individual like eighth note as well. And I felt that like as I switched my perspective from this half note pulse to this really eighth notey pulse, like I was able to kind of um, feel much more of that like source of energy, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, like I was able to control a bit more of the uh, I don't know, like um, the what I felt was like the emotional or vibe of what was going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I think I mean, some of the things that like immediately always stick out to me with this opening, and I think even just not even getting to any of the musical things, I always end up thinking, these tremolos can be really tricky, right? And even just tricky to line up. And I'm like a little bit, I don't know. I feel like when I start learning music, I'm fairly clinical about it. you know, just in terms of the fact that, when you take a look at this pattern, the if you're trying to figure out how to align the right hand, the left hand, well, the right hand always goes with the pinky of the left hand, for
Yeah,
example,
yeah.
right? So I would, if I were practicing this, I'd just separate them. I would just practice the left hand. I just practice going and just have that as an anchor. And then there's the other part of it, I think, that's really physiological when it comes to looking at something like this, that's this kind of twitchy figure in the left hand, this broken figure, is that even though it's really quick and we, want to feel all this energy, we still have to have a sense of actual physical stability.
Hmm.
And I mean, that to me is just even just feeling the alignment on this ulnar bone right here. So this outer
Hmm.
bone, the pinky on the
Yeah,
ulnar bone. And so this is something that I'm always talking to my students about, just feeling how this pinky is attached or supported by this large bone in your arm, and just feeling that as an anchor every single time you play. So that every time I play that, I'm just feeling very, very secure right here. And then I can play it really, really, as quick as I need to, or as rhythmic as I need to, because I have kind of a center that I
yeah.
can kind of keep going back to. And
Hmm.
so if I were practicing that, I would just maybe in practice, I would always just practice the pinky, for example. And then I just add the thumb to it when I feel really comfortable about it, but just always kind of feeling like I'm going back to some home on the pinky.
Yeah.
Um, which is, I mean, very different way of approaching it. I think you're kind of going from the musical essence, and I'm just going from like all this kind of clinical, how to work it out
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
I mean, I was in my approach to that, like, because I mean, I my physiological knowledge isn't. I don't. I mean, the bone structure and things like this. I'm always trying to, by feel, and this is one thing that I really want to fulfill. Is my big knowledge gaps right now, is more specific stuff like that because that gives people a really good kind of way to work forward. It's very specific. It's very, it's rooted in how it works. And what I'm trying to do is like when I spent my first little bit of time practicing this, and I'm trying to, as I'm doing this, I'm just trying to find, I'm just tracing the feeling of um, the sensations in the arm here,
Right, yeah.
um, and just by my feel, learning how to dissipate the tension and to, like, because I remember I was interested a while ago in doing like boogie woogie stuff like fast
Right, yeah.
and maintaining that for like these little Oscar
For like
Peterson records where he's like
extended,
like
yeah.
ripping through it for like and then and then Jeff Johnson, who's like a Newfoundland guy, is a jazz professor there at McGill.
Hmm.
He said that one of his things that he worked on was this piece to kind of work on that boogie woogie-ish technique with a classical teacher of his, like back a long time ago. And then he had pointed me towards an Oscar Peterson boogie that was in B flat, which is like a horrible key in terms of like, and he's just like flying through it, like, and now he had massive hands too. Um, but so because I know that you want to find like the gesture which dissipates so that you can do it so that you can do it forever and then it doesn't become a problem. And so the first days like I was uh, it was harder, but now I found it, so I know what that gesture is.
Right.
I know what that feeling is, and it was kind of going back and forth between those, and then making that resonate with the emotion that I wanted to express while I was playing it, and then binding those things together. But it was way more by feel than by like
I mean,
brain
that's a
or
really good way of doing it. And I think that you can really just marry kinesthetic awareness with the musical
yeah.
gesture. For me, and especially, I guess it's just because I've spent a lot of time breaking this down for students. I like the specificity of it. I'm still kind
Yeah,
of going by feel, but then I have to figure out how to target it, how to really understand it. Because just because I can kind of feel how to do that, um, it's a real puzzle when you're trying to figure out how another student might be experiencing it or another musician is actually experiencing that kind of thing.
for sure.
So that's kind of how start with that. But I mean, I think it's a really good idea to really have like a musical decision to make a musical decision first because I can get really caught in just doing all of this like working things out and then it's I don't know it kind of it takes an extra step to actually get to something that's like musically coherent afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because then you have like the two things. You have to learn the structure of the piece, and then you have to relearn it in the context of like what it is you're trying to
Yeah.
do. And but like it's a much more when I'm working with my students, like I have one student who's working on a Beethoven piece right now. I got two actually, and sonata, and that's kind of fun
Yeah.
because we get to talk about I mean I don't get this kind of opportunity very often, but what we've been doing like a lot of the time is again we'll sit together and one is online but when I'm in person and I'll just feel with them their arm and I'll just kind of guide them to find that point. Um, and again, like I lack, and I tell them, I say, look, I'm sorry, like I'm not able to say it's this bone there or whatever, but eventually we do find it and they click it, and then they feel the difference as they transition from, you know, this, from whatever the first ways of getting at it are to this more uh, physiological approach, but it's just kind of again done by feel
Yeah.
uh, um,
I mean,
than
in
by
many ways, I think
method.
that's probably more powerful. Well, what I'm, trying to do when I kind of explain these things to students is to basically get to the feel of it, right?
Hmm.
Because, just because they know that they have this they have these two long bones in their
Yeah.
forearm doesn't
But,
mean they, yeah, are going to suddenly,
but I think as a result, like you'll have a lot more early consistent result, maybe
yeah.
maybe and but then of course, well, no, because then they'll carry it forward, and then eventually they become an artist who knows how the body works, and then they're able to just put it together, and then they can do it all at
Yeah.
once.
I'm a little torn about it because, if I'm talking to like younger students, I feel like it sounds so dry. Like I don't think I have like an 8-year old who cares what kinds of bones are in their arms. And it's just, I am trying to explain these things to them, but I just don't think it's maybe just too early somehow or I don't know. I never really know how students are going to receive it because it's like it is so clinical and not
Yeah.
really
Yeah, and
interesting.
like you find yourself bouncing off. I don't know. I find me like I try to be very specific about how a thing moves, but then Sasha Corsantia was here one time at the studio. He was like stopping over. He was my teacher in Boston,
Yeah.
and I had like my little 8-year-old student there, and we were doing this thing. And his thing was he was over in the corner like hanging out as I was like teaching this lesson, and then he was like, okay. And then he talked to her for a second. He's like, just play it a little bit louder. It was just so simple. And so like, and I was trying to be so
Think about it.
like surgical
Yeah, yeah.
and say, well, we like here and now, and then, so that was really a great moment. I was like, oh, okay, so I can kind of, maybe but that's why I could see, um, he's also a guy. I we never talked a lot about the physiology. Is that he has again this other. I guess that's why I am the way I am.
He's an amazing musician also.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's just,
Yeah.
um, and and you know. But at the same time I really want to fill that knowledge gap because even if I never use it, like just to know those things I think is so important, and then because it can guide you much more succinctly to a goal,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and it can kind of give you maybe some guidelines just for playing in general, right? If you're especially if you are dealing with a new passage or like a new piece of music that might be
Yeah.
unfamiliar, you just have certain ways of coordinating your body from
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's yeah. It's cool. But then also this, and then the flip side of that is I wonder, and this is kind of a, I don't know if this is a foolish line of thinking or not, but I was like, I wonder, because like the thing about Beethoven, like he kind of reinvented piano technique for the piano that, in the direction to the piano that we have today. And I wonder, because he was a big part of the spirit of the music is I think, like struggling against what's possible,
Yeah, like the
and the
here, for
and
example.
and it's a very kind of uneducated approach, if that makes sense. Like I don't know how much Beethoven was aware of like where things were, and it's just the physical structure that I mean the physical resistance that he's fighting against, like
Yeah,
and
totally.
then he transforms then what's then possible by breaking through to the other side and but of course there's a lot of sheer motivation to kind of get him to that point, but think back, um, I think we talked about this a week or two ago, like the fact that people survive as many people survive music lessons as they do to continue playing music, and like it's they're fighting against already so many barriers, so it's kind of
Yeah.
a similar thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I always think that like just with regards to what you're saying about Beethoven, and that's such a core essence of his music, and I can, I'm sure you've listened to performances or even had played performances where you play everything correctly, and it's
It's
just
never happened.
and it's just kind of bleh. It doesn't really do anything, but it's worked out so well. It's disciplined. You've got the structure all set. Your tempi are steady, and all the notes are there. But it just doesn't really work as a piece of music.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think people who don't get Beethoven sometimes, like they have the ability, like they have great technique and they can just memorize things by looking at it and they know it immediately, and then they translate it to these like effortless motions and they're like, I don't get it. And like, well, I struggled to learn a piece like this, but at the end of it, I feel like this triumphant, like, and even if and then I get to a point where I'm still not consistently playing it correctly, but the feeling behind it, at least I feel, is coming from me, if that makes sense.
one of my maybe my most frustrating learning music stories is I brought the late Opus 126 bagatelles to my teacher
Oh,
in
I
piano.
love those ones. The
For the Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I was just like, yeah, I mean, yeah, they're late Beethoven. They're really quite difficult, but they were such short pieces. So I thought, I'll bring a set of these to my teacher, and I mean, she was. I spent maybe half a semester just on the opening 3, 4 measures of that G major one, and I was so confused after just because it was so hard to really get the actual quality of it.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, I really underestimated my
yeah,
maybe my ability to play them, but also just the pieces themselves.
yeah.
Yeah, that's just
I
very
guess that's what happens. Like you have that for me. Like those pieces are some of the purest pieces of music.
yeah.
You just, and again, like I just like placed him like where he was physically at that time and like emotionally and all this stuff, and he just writes these little like pure heavenly gems of pieces. Like that one is amazing, and then you have this, that it's just floating. It's just so good. Um, and but when it comes to like this one, that kind of stuff, which is for me like, I just never had it to pull that stuff off uh, consistently. Like for me, 1 and 3 and 5 were okay, and then 2 was more of like, just that I gotta play 16th notes again.
Yeah, no, I had so much trouble with the first one.
Yeah.
Just with actually like, just treating the counterpoint properly. It was
And it's amazing how it later comes into the bass, like that melody, and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just,
exactly.
and then and I love that piece. I played those for my graduation recital,
Oh, cool.
at for my undergrad, and
Oh, awesome.
I really, yeah. But I know what you mean. Like they're just so deceiving, and I guess like when I was practicing when I was younger, I would get distracted a lot, and I would kind of go like I was talking about like with my neighbor. I would kind of get carried away just trying to get like this balance of a very simple thing, um, and I would spend for long periods of time figuring it out on the way that it feels like from my middle.
Hmm.
But I had no patience to like, like like do all to do these kind of things.
The total
Um,
opposite. It's so funny.
yeah. This is why we're
I
good for each other, Michael. We can.
I was just, I love a good etude. It's the weird, I don't know.
Yeah.
I always brought and learned etudes, just a
They
bunch of
just
them.
scare me. They just scare me so much
Yeah.
because I
They're
just
like
know that I'm never gonna buckle down and do it.
they're just
And
like little
then,
puzzles to me. I feel like the process is so much more linear for me than it is
yeah,
having to play like having to
yeah.
play that over, and like really just feeling the space and like getting the atmosphere totally right.
I wish I could do what you do. Like I wish I could
I
figure
never
out that linear approach to
vice versa.
things. And I mean, I've been working on this etude like seriously since about like 2009. Whenever I have a few minutes, I'll pick it up and I'll poke at it again.
Yeah,
I'm not bothering to learn any other etude till I figure that one out.
that's good.
And
That's a good one. That's a good one.
I mean, it's a good horrible one. It's kind of like the Pathetique Sonata. It's just like it's just like you can't be playing these pieces. It's like playing Für Elise. But but I just wanted like part of me wants I just want so much to be able to do it so that I never have to do it.
It's really funny. So I learned most of the Chopin etudes. Like
Yeah.
with it was just kind of a I don't know if it was an it was a subtle expectation, I guess, of my teacher in Toronto. And I kind of I don't know, I maybe learned 16 or 18 of them.
Okay.
That's some of the ones that I just had no interest in, but um it's funny how much that helped as
Yeah.
it just like general technical development. Just I've never really performed. I performed like maybe a handful of them, but I learned
Hmm.
them all and never really played them in public very much. But it was something really changed after I learned them. I had spent hours. I still practice the 25/6 every single day.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I still warm up with it all the time. But
Yeah.
it just made everything, I guess because they were so hard, it just made everything so much easier somehow to
Yeah. Yeah.
work out.
No,
Um,
it's like this kind of like perpetual development thing. Like I asked Sasha a while ago, so I really want to pick up playing classical music again, and I don't know kind of where to begin. He's like, pick any Beethoven sonata, and any one of them is going to challenge like you on some technical aspect or some musical level. Each one has their own kind of, and he was right. Like, and the etudes too, but he knew that I wouldn't like, really get around to it. He was really kind to me in that like or he just knew that it wasn't my disposition to kind of go like um, learning them like that,
yeah.
and I wish that I could or would, and maybe I will. I don't know. Like I don't really see it, but
I think you could just dive.
it's
I mean, you can just dive in. To me, it's like they're kind of little puzzles, and I find that really
yeah,
fun.
yeah,
Just figuring out what the actual technique is, figuring out how to get get
So
around.
what's your first kind of thing when you're diving into an etude? How would or like what things are you looking for? Like, are you using the Cortot versions to like to kind of see what he says, or do you just kind of like dive in on yourself and
I
like
use the Corto for some things. So one of the first things we always had to learn with Professor Orlov was 10/8, the F major.
uh-huh.
The I am not warmed up, but anyways, we had to learn that, and it was just to learn about how to transfer weight and how to get between these middle fingers properly, and like the way that we worked on that, and then was so helpful that it kind of could start to apply these concepts to other pieces.
Yeah.
And we did use the Corto editions as well, just to see what he was up to. I haven't done any of the. I'm too impatient to do some of those Corto exercises. I think
See,
they're kind of
and that's
unnecessary.
funny because like the I would get caught up on a core toe exercise and then just not get to the A2. Like I just like do two or three of those and then it's okay, I'm done. Like because I found those like it's extracting like the thing of whatever it is and then
Yeah,
like
sure.
focusing on that one and that was enough for me and then I just never got around to like applying it. But that's really it's really interesting and it's of course like each of these is going to carry you forward and it gives you that you know what you need to just develop over time like
Yeah.
these tools and yeah.
But I also think that like for every etude that I learned, I think any slow movement I play is I still kind of struggle with.
Mm,
It's having that kind of like I don't know, having that kind of patience to
yeah.
to play something so beautifully and like with
Well, I
such
don't
good
know.
atmosphere. I find that so
Maybe
hard.
it's not so much patience as it is belief. That's one thing
Mhm.
that like I've come to like in this because I've been exploring this world of music that is like, you know, at its essence simple and slow,
Yeah.
but somehow transfixing and beautiful and like breath holding. And in my experience there, like it's just having the confidence to truly believe in every note that you play. Because the actual thing itself is,
Fair.
for you would be not hard, um, um, but I think,
There's a real conviction's a really good word for that. And I think there's also just this real concentration. I
mhm,
think that anytime I think that generally I probably with everyone I play the worst whenever I'm worried about what people are thinking about what I'm playing.
absolutely, yeah,
And I think having that just like Richter, didn't teach because he wasn't sure if he was going to be right. I always think that. Like, I mean, I don't always, but I often think that on stage. Like, is what I'm doing, compelling, or is it worthwhile, to listen
mhm.
to?
Yeah.
And
We're,
it's just like I get stuck in this kind of I don't know this cycle.
it reminds me of like a question I asked Tim when I first went to Mun. I was like, when we play, are we playing for ourselves or are we playing for the audience or are we playing for, I mean, who, like what is like, you know, am I trying to like, he didn't really have an answer. I still am
Yeah, it's a hard
like,
question.
it's, but because what you're saying is like, because that's such a crippling feeling,
Yeah,
like, and
it's inhibiting certainly.
yeah.
Yeah,
So again, So then the thing I've been kind of taking a bit of refuge in is the belief. It's hard to hold on to that belief authentically.
yeah.
It's easy to say, yeah, I believe in this, but to actually do it and then follow through with it, that it can lead you down some,
I
you know,
think, yeah, and I think actually I was better at it when I was younger. Somehow I felt more self-assured in like what I was trying to express. I feel
mhm.
like now, I don't know, when you start to know more things, it makes it harder to choose one thing to decide on one thing. Like I mean I went through this whole cycle of listening to recordings of myself just to see what I used to sound like and after but sometime between my master's and my DMA, I listened to some of my old undergrad recordings, and I thought, oh God, like these are just terrible. But after a few years and just getting some distance from it and listening to them again, I think, oh, there's something there. It's actually quite fresh, what I'm listening to. I have this.
Yeah.
I played the Schumann Fantasy for my undergrad,
Oh,
the
cool.
graduating
Yeah.
recital, and I just was so, I mean, there's like wrong notes all over the place, but it's like I had such a clear picture of what I wanted that piece to be,
Mm,
and there's a real spirit to it that I at least admire now looking back on it, but I probably didn't when I was too close to it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. It's
Anyway,
yeah, like it's and I wonder now if you listen back to something that you record. Well, I mean, you're at that stage now with your pieces from a few years ago, right? I
yeah,
guess you have a bit more distance and like you're looking back at pictures of ourselves, like when we thought something of ourselves from now to like 10 years ago, and then you get this totally. I mean, I find sometimes I look back at myself in 2008, just a photo, and it's just like I'm shocked at like how I perceive myself,
yeah.
remembering
At
how
the
I
time,
felt about myself at that time.
yeah.
Um, and but yeah,
Just part of the. I guess it's just part of the process, but it is
I
just
guess
funny. I don't know.
yeah. And they always say the more that you learn, the less that you know, or there's like some kind of, or the more that,
That is
the
true.
more that you learn, the more you realize what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Um, and then I guess yeah, it's just um, taking the thing from. I mean, I was watching Yu Wang talk about like Rock 3 or something, and she's like, I can't talk about the process because it just works. I don't want to touch it,
Yeah, right.
you
Wasn't
know.
there
And
this? I don't know if this is. I don't know if I read it or just heard it from someone. Yehudi Menuhin. I don't know if you.
mhm.
I don't know how to pronounce his name, so I'm sorry if I
I,
butchered.
I I know who you mean, and I that's how I think I would say it.
Violinist, right? He was a child
Yeah.
prodigy. I remember learning, or I heard hearing from someone that when he got older and needed to teach the violin, he didn't actually know how he was doing anything that he did, and then he decided to like break it down and think about it, but it just never worked again. It just was so much harder for him to actually play the
Yeah.
violin because he was now cognizant of everything that he was doing.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's a funny.
It's yeah. I mean, to
Yeah.
do something and then to deconstruct it, and then I guess depending on what stage of life you're at, then to go back to the freedoms that you had before would be a
Yeah.
whole, like a rebirth cycle kind of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's really wacky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't talk too much about the Pathétique sonata.
In fact, no, I think I played like 14 notes in total.
I played one time the first four bars ish. Um,
Really got off track here.
well, I don't know. I thought it would be cool just to kind of sit at the piano and have this whatever conversation comes out.
Yeah.
Um, and there's stuff that I discovered in my practicing of this. And already what we've talked about, like we have completely different approaches to things, both of them in their own way valid. And like, you know, I just exploring those processes one little bit at a time could be maybe a fun thing to kind of
Yeah.
explore.
It's nice to have
Um,
the piano on hand too, in case we.
if you feel like
Yeah.
playing a little line of a F major thing.
And that was my first. I mean, I did this for like a semester and a half, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Yes. Like. Yeah. Exactly. Like, kind of like what you said before about the debate. Like you're getting that. Oh, and then everything has to be like, and that D just has to be
Just
like,
perfect. Yeah.
has to be perfect, and and then you don't want to use the soft pedals, so you have to kind of get off of that, and then you
Yeah,
have to just like lean. Oh, it's uh,
beautiful music.
it's beautiful music. Well, maybe I think it's difficult as reflecting upon the original idea or the episode here. I think it'd be too difficult to um, to talk about anything that doesn't happen to us spontaneously. So it was kind of cool, like when you were talking about using that as a ground to um, and the lining up of your arm like that, and little bits of things might come out, and
Yeah,
that's cool. And it's also fine. I don't mind struggling trying to put things into words with the stress of it's kind of a really great exercise for me
yeah.
to bumble through trying to express something very simply with the stress of like knowing that we're recording it and
And also just, you know, having to pitch ideas to each other. I think that that's
yeah.
also kind of spurs
Yeah, I think it's something that we could
thoughts.
definitely develop and go down. And I mean, people are like, You're gonna have like things to talk about." I say, I mean, we could talk about
We
like
have too
a
many
lot
things to
for.
talk
We
about.
have too many things to talk about. But I'm just trying to think like, I did make this video that I think would be fun for some folks to see.
Sure, yeah.
That's, I mean, nobody will ever want to watch the thing, but I think just declassifying this kind of hidden process would be kind of fun. And maybe there could be like some kind of unlisted playlist that we create
Yeah,
that people
sure.
can kind of like follow like the progression of like maybe what we do is like eventually we learn the piece and we record the process and then we record the actual piece and then once we've actually learned it and recorded the piece as a video we could watch that and talk about each other's performances and approaches to it then. And then there'd be like, for anybody who's like super nerdy and diving and interested in looking into like a guy who knows what he's talking about and a guy who's like feeling what he's talking and I think that'd be really kind of a fun kind of process to kind of open up.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. You know what you're
and
talking about. I think you can give yourself
I know
credit
I
for
no
that.
I just I'm not it's like you it's just a bit less specific. I don't again like I'm not putting myself down in that like oh like boo hoo I do want to kind
Sure.
of be more specifically um, but you are very much more articulate about some stuff whereas I have I just have to kind of work from a more abstract place to kind of put things into words.
Sure, yeah.
Um, and I accept that that's who I am, and I'm okay with that. And we're always on some kind of path to getting better as teachers and musicians and piano players and humans, and
Absolutely.
working on our ability to to do that. So maybe to kind of close out the conversation about this, that might be a fun target. Like let's try and get the sonata recorded in some shape or form in the next X amount of time.
Yeah.
Like we both no one's really
I'll probably
following
just do
at the edge,
excerpts of it.
huh?
I'll probably just be able to do excerpts of it just in the next little while, but yeah.
Yeah. I kind of want to play because like I do these little things here. So here at the studio, I wanted to kind of create like at least like a monthly or possibly bi-weekly concert that's not really a concert where I just kind of invite people in and we drink drinks and we play some music
That's great.
or I play some music and just to kind of like
Yeah.
have
So,
and it's just a way for me to kind of also play a bit and also to kind of get people to kind of see what's going on and so I would maybe try and get that done for some point and I mean the recording is not going to be so we're not going to publish it on Spotify we're going to put it onto an
wait, we are?
on
Yeah.
playlist
Yeah.
for the 8 people who are going to kind of find their way from the podcast
Maybe
to
nine
that
now. So
maybe 9 um, to that link
once
and
my mom
then
figures out how to use Spotify, it'll be nine.
well hopefully we'll get her onto the Apple Music one soon and that it saves a step from having to do that
Yeah.
um, but just as a kind of a a no timelined goal, and it doesn't matter who gets it done first or last or better or worse, but just to say that that could be one line of conversation that this can go down. But again, I think one of the things I want to kind of direct our attention towards in the next little while is piano pedagogy music, for like pieces for students.
Yeah, for sure.
And because remember the one where the last year when like we took a piece and we talked about the applications of it and stuff like this.
Yeah,
I'd like to kind of jump back into that train and put the because this is more abstract, kind of
yeah,
philosophical,
it is.
two piano guys talking about whatever, which is I think is
Veered
neat.
off. Yeah,
But we bring it back to there, and then there's no reason that we can't maintain these two things. But if we have like a once a month or once a week weekly thing, and I think that would be that's just me thinking out loud here. I don't know what you think.
that's a great idea.
You're,
I mean, I think that's kind of how we intended to start it, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. So I mean, basically, all this is kind of like it's kind of fun to kind of explore different ways of talking in different directions of things
Sure.
we can
We
talk
should
about, and
get back to the whole pedagogy thing.
yeah, and you know, it, if you're trying to say, well, what's this podcast about? Well, I kind of like the way I summed it up. I made it like some science, like two guys who play the piano talk about music and life. I think that's a pretty but it would be kind of also neat to see if we focus on a direction, if we can then get put it into do a few of those, and then maybe we start to advertise it a bit broadly, and then bring other folks into the fold who will
Yeah,
be
that'd be
catching up on
fun.
all this stuff
Yeah,
after having seen our more recent awesome talking about the pedagogical composers of today and using it with students and stuff like this.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. That's a great idea.
Cool.
All
Well,
right.
I mean,
Yeah,
so those are some thoughts and some vague directions for things to kind of continue in.
yeah.
But I think I feel like we've drifted on a little bit. Like how long we've been
It's been
talking?
like an hour, I think. Or but we
Yeah.
had all
So
those tech difficulties, so maybe it's been
maybe it's a
45.
bit
Maybe it's
okay.
been
Maybe
kind of
maybe 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 we found that magic 45-minute point. That'd be
yeah.
cool. I think we may have exceeded it though. So
Yeah.
anyway, so for anybody who's still here, thanks for hanging out.
Good time to sign off. Yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah, it was
and
interesting. It was
yeah.
a combo.
Um, so there we go. Cool. Great.
All right.
Have a nice day.
You too.